Free speech is alive and well on today's News Talk, TNT.
Indeed, it is alive and well here on TNT. And where else in the media are you going to see a discussion of Smotrich's remarks? Bezalel Smotrich, is it not Beelzebub Smotrich? He said in a speech on Monday that Israel has no choice but to send humanitarian aid into Gaza. He would much rather they didn't. Obviously, it's not possible in today's global reality to manage a war. No one will allow us to starve 2 million people, even though that might be just and moral, until they return the hostages, he said at a press conference, in support of Jewish settlements, illegal Jewish settlements under international law, of course. Now, these people, Freddie Ponton joining me from the south of France, Smotrich is part of a government that is closely allied to the governments of Western Europe, the European Union and the United States. So why do we continue to send these people arms and money when they are quite clearly hell-bent on genocide?
Well, Basil, this is the game that has been played, and it's been played for more than 10 months. Nothing has changed, and it doesn't matter what Joseph Borrell is going to say. The European Union stance on the Israel conflict is that it is okay. It is okay, and we've seen over the past 10 months a genocide unfolding, and very little has been done. And everyone knows that Smotrich has, an utter contempt for international law and for basic principles of humanity. So this is not new to them. It's not like they just find out that this guy is a monster. So nothing is going to change. It's just basically buying the time. I think the ICJ as well has been dragging this foot for a very long time. Same for the ICC. We are,
Yes.
approaching the middle of August, and we are yet to see a warrant for the arrest of Netanyahu and you have Gallant, and perhaps they definitely should have one for Smotrich, Bezalel Smotrich. So again, I think it's all a game that has been played, but we're not fools, and everyone that's been following this crisis in Gaza and in the West Bank and East Jerusalem know exactly what is going on, and I think that it's a stain in the history of the Western world. So we are witnessing something that is allowed to happen.
Absolutely. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell called them remarks beyond ignominious, saying it demonstrates once again his contempt for international law and for basic principles of humanity. Those are relatively strong words from a diplomat, but no sign of any sanctions. Meanwhile, David Lammy, Britain's new Foreign Secretary, said there can be no justification for Minister Smotrich's remarks. And crucially, we expect the wider Israeli government to retract and condemn them. Now, I've been searching and I can't find any retraction or condemnation. I think that tells you everything you need to know about the Zionist regime. That basically, they endorse what Smotrich has said, but they know that they can't all say it in unison.
Well, the first person that should really demonstrate leadership is Bibi Netanyahu. If he accepts this kind of language, and he has no problems, with his Minister of Finance, coming out with this outrageous statements, then clearly it's not the United States that is coming to the rescue, although they've all expressed, condemnations for such language. But at the end of the day, it's just cosmetic. It is cosmetic, and that nothing is going to change on the ground. So I've given up any hope from the European Union and from the United States. It's not going to, if there is a change that is to happen on the Palestinian land, it will not come from these countries. It will come from something else, something that comes out. And I think the frustrations of the Arab world has grown tremendously over the past 10 months. And I can guarantee you that many of the countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt itself are finding itself very, very difficult to go on for another 6 months like this. They'll find it extremely difficult because the tensions are already rising in these cities. And when you hear statements like Smotrich, he's just put literally fuel on the fire. And this fire has grown over the past 10 months. And then, of course, with this looming retaliation from the Iranian government, I think it's all kind of coming to a crossroads. I think enough is enough. And I think the answers will definitely come from Iran. We're going to see how bad the situation is. I don't think we really can understand how bad it is, but I think we will be able to better understand with the level of retaliations coming out of not only Iran, but the Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. So let's see what's going to happen, Basil, because I think we're going to have an answer to some of our questions.
I sincerely hope so. We'll come to Iran and its response to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in a moment. But first, you mentioned Egypt. Their foreign ministry today condemned Smotrich's remarks, describing them as shameful statements, unacceptable in form and substance, and a violation of international humanitarian law. Such irresponsible statements create incitement against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. I mean, even that's a very, very mild statement. Incitement against Palestinians. They're being bombed in schools today. 30 have been killed. At least 30 people have been killed in the bombing of a school. The massacres continue seemingly with impunity. And Egypt is quite simply bribed by the Americans, pure and simple. If Egypt takes any firmer stance against Israel, then the Americans cut off the money and Egypt implodes. I think that's about the size of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty much it. I mean, you described it very, very well. I think the path after the Abrahams Accord was very difficult for all these countries. It's very difficult to turn back or to rebuild that credibility. And the OIC meetings, I think, brought some kind of legitimacy in the discourse in terms of condemning, really, everything that has happened over the past 10 months in very, very strong terms, and not condemning Iran for willing to exercise its right to defend itself. Because at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. I think it is quite clear that Hamas had the right to defend itself against this occupation, which has been deemed illegal by the International Court of Justice. And then so all that we are seeing and we're experimenting at the moment is a constant, basically, challenge from Israel towards a rule-based order, if you will, with international or where institutions have and mean something, and therefore civilians are protected. And then we can clearly see that this does not apply for Israel. And the only explanation to that is that the United States and the European Union, the Western world at large, is allowing it to happen. And that's really, unbalancing the world, because the world wants peace in general. If you go to the United States or in Europe, anyone that I get to talk to, nobody tells me I want more bomb. I want to kill children. I want to kill women. Nobody tells me that. So where does that come from? It certainly does not come from the public or a very limited amount of them. So it's a political decision. This has to do with the balance of power in the world. This is about global financial dominance, promoted by Israel and, of course, defended by the United States. And this has to stop one way or the other.
Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz today said that Israel's decision to revoke the status of Norwegian diplomats serving the occupied Palestinian territories was due to their anti-Israel conduct. I thought that was quite an interesting footnote. But to turn back to Iran, Pezeshkian, the new president, is very firmly pro-West, and he has apparently exercised a steadying hand on the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. And it now looks as if Iran may not retaliate to anything like the degree that was being predicted only 24, 48 hours ago. Professor Morandi said that he thought Iran would cause Israel to regret having assassinated Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the diplomatic wing of Hamas. And that would seem to indicate a very major attack. Now the latest reports are Pezeshkian may indeed have talked Khamenei out of doing anything much at all. Hezbollah, on the other hand, say they're going to, they're definitely going to act independently of whatever Iran does. Now, one can only think that Pezeshkian is basically trying to curry favor with the West, with Washington in particular, to a lesser extent, of course, London, Brussels, and Berlin, because if they don't retaliate, the Iranians, do you think that then means they get brownie points from Western leaders and they can take the moral high ground, turn around and say, look, Israel is the mad dog here, violating sovereignty, assassinating people at will. We are the adults in the room. We are the ones with the moral high ground. And that may tip the balance in terms of diplomatic activity.
Well, everyone has its own opinion on this matter. I personally believe that this is a game that has been played, and I think a lot of diversions and a lot of things are happening, if you will, on the Iranian side. And I think a lot of it is distraction. I think the decisions have already been made by the supreme leader. I think the signals from Russia coming, delivering S-400s and other electronic warfare capabilities to the Iranian armed forces. I think it's, all the signs are there. But of course, they're going to plan a couple of informations here and there to confuse the outcome. But my view on it is that Iran cannot afford at this stage to remain silent or to remain refrained with the assassination of a Hamas peace negotiator in their countries under their guard, their responsibility. I've lived in the Arab world and in different continents, and I can tell you that honor and insulting is something that they don't take lightly. Now, this is not going to be the retaliation that perhaps people are expecting, which is, the next 24 hours, the next 8 hours, we're going to have a launch of ballistic missile coming from all over the place. Iranians are sophisticated, and it's a sophisticated adversary for the West, and it must not be undermined. They will take their time, and they will take absolutely all the time they need to inflict an appropriate response for Israeli crimes. Might not look like what we are expecting. I think something is in the play at this moment. I think the Russians are involved in these discussions, and I think all the other states have been played with different stories, with the international airport closing at 3 p.m. this afternoon. All these stories about, you can clearly see there's a lot of disinformations going on, because I think this time the Iranians don't want anybody to be prepared. They're going to go along with their plan, and nothing is going to stop that. That's my view about it.
Of all people, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has had a phone call with the new Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian today, urging him reminding him of the need to prevent the expansion of the ongoing conflict in Gaza, including with reference to Lebanon, urging her counterpart to avoid further escalation and to reopen the path to dialogue. It's so ironic when the Israelis don't want any dialogue at all. How can you have dialogue with somebody who assassinates your negotiators? Anyway, we're going to take a short break for the headlines. When we come back, I'll be asking Freddie about what he thinks is the prospects for peace in Eastern Europe. Rumblings there that in spite of the delivery of the F-16s, there might be a breakthrough on the horizon. We'll be right back.
We don't rock. We talk. Today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
And welcome back to the program. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by investigative journalist Freddie Ponton. Derek Rose won't be joining us this afternoon, but that gives us more time to go into depth with Freddie. Freddie, Eastern Europe, we can pivot there just for the moment. Noises sort of rumbling in the background that there might be peace. Donald Trump, his election prospects are looking dimmer by the day. but he said he'll bring the war to an end before even getting back into the Oval Office. Tim Walz, on the other hand, he might as well have a Ukrainian flag tattooed on his forehead. And then, of course, most recently, there was the Ukrainian incursion into the Kursk region, which has had the Russians scurrying. But where are we at the moment with that dreadful morass? Can you paint a picture of clarity for our viewers and listeners by any chance?
It's a bit of still under the fog of war, So the Ukrainian incursion into Russian territory it's been noted. It's been noted by the international press and certainly by the Russians. And I think it was a bit of a surprise to them, which is a bit bizarre. Thought that the Russians have their eyes pretty much everywhere in Ukraine and would have known this kind of preparation. However, they still have to deal with the fact that the AFU, the Ukrainian armed forces, have captured the city of Sudzan and killing civilians indiscriminately. And then between yesterday and today, Ukrainian formations have pulled up reserves and began pretty much immediately reinforcing their positions. And it is quite clear that the combat has intensified and the onslaught with it. And they've tried to advance in the Korenevo and Sumy district, and pretty much most of Sumy city has been captured by the Ukrainians. So the last report I was reading earlier this afternoon said that also indicated that the Ukrainians' offensive was taking the directions of Yuskovo district. So we can clearly see that past the border, the Ukrainian is trying to gain terrains in the Russian territory. It's not far, it's not deep yet, but it is of concern because, of course, it impacts the civilian populations. And then this military operation in Ukraine must demonstrate a military target, if you will. This has to be targeted towards the military assets of the Russians. But unfortunately, what we are saying is that this particular area and this oblast are mainly logistic hub and routes for the Russian military, if you will. Apart from that, really, there is only the gas hub in Sudzan. This is the only pipeline and gas hubs left that transport Russian gas into Europe via Ukraine. So there's no real kind of a benefit for Ukraine to trying to damage it in any way. They're making money with the transit of gas through the country. So what is the real goal here? And that's really the only questions that I've got for this operation, because occupation of this territory is clearly not the goal. I mean, it looks like it's more that creating a tension point, if you will, and trying to fortify a little bit this area to create basically some kind of embarrassment for the Russian Federation and its army, and kind of a thorn in the foot of the Russian army that they have to deal with. But as I said, it really looked like, as Putin said, a large-scale provocation, because I failed to see the real military benefit for Ukraine. And of course, time is of the essence. And I don't see what is the benefit for the AFU to sacrifice, let's put it that way, to sacrifice 1,000 men, material and equipment in this particular area, because we can clearly see the Russians are really already, especially around Sumy, they're trying to cut basically the Ukrainian retreats, which means that they intend to capture these guys or to kill them. So yes, I mean, it's a provocation that could cost dearly to the AFU. And then I think also it's a kind of a bit of a PR exercise, because the sceneries in eastern Ukraine and in the Donbass were pretty gloomy, especially with the AFU struggling to recapture the village they lost around the Kharkov region. And then, of course, this tremendous advance after the captures of Advivka as well. So all that was difficult because it was simply just bad for the moral for the Ukrainian troops. And I think that clearly there was a loss of confidence in Ukraine being able to handle more of it. So I think there was a desperate kind of need for a special operation, trying to turn a little bit that tune and trying to make it look slightly better for the Ukrainian. But I'm afraid all I see is a PR exercise that's going to, of course, trigger more death for the Ukrainian troops, and perhaps they will capture a couple of Russian people and military personnel along the way. But there's no objectives there, real military objectives. So this will end up pretty bad. And I think the next few days will definitely indicate what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it looks like it could be an own goal within a week or two. Nick Payton-Smith, writing for CNN, says Kiev needed a win, but not a gamble. And the fact, as you mentioned, that there's no clear strategic objective means that this could be interpreted as a moment of desperation by Ukraine, whose generals have in the past been criticized for being too slow and too conservative. Do you think they might be doing this in order to sort of attract the attention of the West and sort of say, look, we're still, over here, we're still fighting and we need more weapons and money?
Yes, absolutely. This is just, I don't see any other way to explain that. I mean, this is certainly something cooked up, in some CIA office, in Ukraine, with the idea of, maintaining the pressure on the Russians and trying to, as I said, to remain relevant on the social media and on all these media platform, and giving a little bit of meat for all these mainstream media, which you can clearly see is feeding themselves with, calling it a victory, an unprecedented move. I mean, the whole wording is out, so everybody's trying to capitalize on this. It's going to support US NATO interests and prepare basically certainly a narrative towards September and October. But this is, I don't see how this is going to help in any negotiations. I've read some of the report talking about Ukraine trying to gain some weight for future negotiations. Well, that's not going to help them at all, because they're going to be pushed back clearly. And I think we have also to bear in mind that this is not the first incursion in the region. It has happened before, and we've seen many incursions in Belgorod and in Kursk region. So it's nothing new here. What is regrettable is that these mercenaries are basically moving into Russian territories and killing civilians at will. We have already seen a couple of videos going around. Of course, this needs to be confirmed, but you can clearly see cars being targeted, fired upon. It looks like it's indiscriminate. And we have to be a little bit worried for the people and the resident of Shuta, and hopefully hoping that the Ukrainian will not do anything, regrettable. But I think it will come to as quick as it arrives. That's my view, Basil.
We're going to take a short break now. When we come back, an article in the Kiev Independent, and I quote, "In any and every corner of Ukraine, one would be very hard-pressed to find an ordinary person, civilian or military, who doesn't want this cruel and brutal war to end." I wonder if that signals a sea change in the attitude of ordinary people, and that indeed this cruel and unnecessary war can be brought to an end. I'll be talking to Freddie Ponton, investigative journalist, about that right after this short break.
Political commentator and investigative journalist. You're with Patrick Henningsen on today's News Talk, TNT.
And welcome back to the Patrick Henningsen Show with me, Basil Valentine. Ukrainians want nothing more than to be able to live without fear of nighttime missile attacks, to see their loved ones return home from the front, not just for a short vacation, but for good, and most of all, to stop the never-ending conveyor belt of funerals and obituaries for the country's best and bravest people. So writes Francis Farrell in the Kiev Independent. Zelensky's also been making noises about peace, even saying that the Russians should be at the next round of negotiations. It does seem that war fatigue is finally setting in. And if the Ukrainian leadership listen to their own people, that article, as I say, in the Kiev Independent, then the time to bring this pointless slaughter to an end must be fast approaching, Freddie.
Yeah, we're approaching the presidential. It's the run up to the U.S. presidential elections, so that this has a major impact on how Zelensky must approach with a lot of cautions. His future move, because his days could be counted, literally counted. He knows that Donald Trump, if he's elected, will certainly push for a negotiation to stop the bleeding, to stop the suffering of the civilian population, but also of these young recruits that are dying on the front, and the Russian meat grinder. And I think also there's a lot of implications with those that have provided weapons to Ukraine as well, and everybody's very cautious. So we can start to read in the press, if you analyze it thoroughly, you can understand that even the German, for example, with Ralf Stegner, the German politician of Social Democratic Party, the SPD, and people like Sarah Wagenknecht, that have expressed a lot of cautions about the potential of use of German weapons, in the Ukrainian advance, for example, in the Kursk Oblast. So again, we can clearly see that no one wants to make the wrong move at the wrong time, because it could derail and it could put them in a very bad light, not only during the potential negotiations or future negotiations, but right now in September and October, things could degenerate very quickly. And I think this is going to be about NATO, some of the key allies like Germany, France, Britain, to manage that situation until the elections provide an answer as to where things are going to go. So it's not going to be easy. And I think this effort is demanded from Zelensky, and Zelensky needs to play along, showing some good faith in case things goes wrong.
Jade McGlynn is a Ukraine expert and research fellow at King's College London. If I can quote her briefly, as a military strategy, I remain a bit puzzled, but as a political strategy, it's been very successful. She's talking about the incursion into the Kursk region. It suggests yet again that Putin's red lines are only words, and that Russia is not as strong as some make out. Fears that Russia could retaliate against the West have been behind decisions by President Biden and others to restrict the use of high-value weapons such as F-16 fighters to territory inside Ukraine's borders, and there have been no confirmed reports yet of their use in the Kursk offensive, although there have been some statements by Russia that Ukraine has been using Stryker and Bradley armored vehicles. So that means that means American weaponry on Russian soil. I mean, this is sort of crossing a Cold War red line, isn't it? I mean, as I say, we like to think that sheer war and battle fatigue on the Ukrainian side will bring this to an end quickly. But again, that represents a sort of escalation, even though Zelensky is denying it, of course.
It's all provocation based, Basil. I mean, that's my view. It's provocation. The F-16s are provocations because it's not going to change the outcome. So from a military point of view, the analysis, and you have had many experts, even those that are not especially pro-Russians, have all said it, that nothing is going to change. The outcome would remain the same. The important aspect of it is how countries that have supported this war for so long are going to come out of it, and everybody has to be extremely cautious, because this is really about right now, not the red line. This is about presenting yourself, or allowing your equipment, your military equipment, to be used outside of Ukraine, directly allowing it to attack the Russian Federation's sovereignty. So these people are playing with fire all day. That's what they're doing, hoping that Russia will remain kind of, composed. And they're extremely lucky to have a Vladimir Putin. If you had a Medvedev as a president, things would have gone pretty awry a long time ago. So yes, it's managing this crisis because it's also the reputation of NATO. It's the United States foreign policies, the failure of their decisions and supporting a war that simply did not need to happen because it's a war they triggered themselves. This is a war they created for themselves and for the poor Ukrainians. And I think people are starting to really feel sorry for the Ukrainians because they start to understand that this was not created really by Ukraine. They've had some rogue factions doing stupid things in the Donbass for many years. But in all, with all the information that has been revealed today, it's quite clear that this war is the result of a Western intelligence operations, under NATO, sponsored by the United States, and the price that the Ukrainian population had to pay for that. Nothing compared to that. Doesn't matter a couple of victory in a village there, killing a couple of civilians in Russia. You put that aside and you realize how many people in Ukraine have died so that NATO and the US can have their say in this conflict and provoke Russia into an open war, hoping the Ukrainian will, take their time before dying and hopefully win this battle. The whole thing is a failure battle. It's a failure for humanity. It is absolutely outrageous that this intelligence community from the West is able to pull up jobs like this that really, really damage countries, that destroy countries. And Ukraine is just another name in the long list of countries that the United States has destroyed. And as I said, I think we are lucky to have some of these near-peer adversary, as they call them, very, very composed. And hopefully they'll stay that way until people can go around the table and find a peace agreement. We can only hope for that because otherwise it will be World War III.
Oh, absolutely. I like to think that peace is nearer than World War III when it comes to the Ukraine, than that everybody will just grow tired of this. We seem to be on the precipice of using nuclear weapons a few months ago. It's rather like the tide. It comes in and goes out. Absolutely on the brink of open hostilities between Russia and NATO 1 minute, and then things calm down. Everybody gets quieter. So it remains to be seen, all sorts of predictions. And of course, here on TNT, we believe in peace, universal human rights, and freedom of expression, amongst other values, in case you were wondering, which is why we take the line that we do. We do not advocate the warmongers, for heaven's sake. There's enough of them on the corporate networks. Now, finally, Freddie, this hour, I've done my best to boycott this Olympics. I've always been an avid Olympics fan in the past. I've tried to watch as little as possible because of the presence of Israeli athletes who should be banned, of course. But I have found myself drawn into watching some of the blue-ribboned athletics in the evenings this week. Forbes is reporting that the events have been a triumph for France and Paris in particular, with lots of medals won by French athletes, good attendances at most of the events in the end, and from what I can tell, a very good atmosphere as well. Earlier, there were reports that the athletes were all forced to eat vegan food and that there were no tourists in Paris either. But meanwhile, French Parliament remains in deadlock after the recent general election, doesn't it? I mean, I would imagine Macron is basking in the reflected glory of the Olympics and trying to milk it for all it's worth. But what else is happening on the ground in France? Is there a new prime minister yet, or is it the stalemate continuing?
Well, I must say I've pretty much applied your same the same cautions about watching the Olympics games. So I've stayed away from most of the main media in France. As you know, I don't watch television, so I do get my news by sources and by a few independent journalists and people that I know personally that I trust, And then the rest is whatever the international media has to tell us about what's going on in France. I know my country very well, and I know that right now the impossible situations with these coalitions, governments, with Ensemble and the left and the communists coming together with the Greens to try to form a government, it's a headache. It's a simple headache, and everybody is trying to pull the rug in their directions, or the blanket, let's say. And it's not going to be an easy job to present someone to lead this new government that everybody is going to accept. Now, they can accept it on paper. He might be playing a role for maybe a few months, but is it someone that can do the job? And the answer to this question is no. No one can do the job, because the job is not in our parliament. The decisions, the crucial decisions, everything that matters on many, many levels are, they basically depends on the legal framework provided by the European Union. So it doesn't matter who leads France to die.
I thought you were going to say all the decisions are made by the Élysée Palace and the president rather than the Assembly of Deputies.
No, well, that's pretty much the same anyway, but it's the Élysée Palace does. You know, we have this holistic technocracy that governs the countries with their consultancy firms. But at the end of the day, these elections has changed a little bit, few things, but not much. As I said, it's not going to change the trajectory. It's not going to stop the corruption. It's not going to basically end the globalist game, you know, in our countries, because the games is played not on French soil. We are the result of this game. The games and the rules are played at a European level. So that's what I watch EU's. If I want to know what's going to happen in France, I just have to watch what's the EU saying. The rest really doesn't matter.
Well, that's another reason why
it's a pessimistic view. I agree, but that's the my honest truth. And that's the truth. If for no other reason than what you've just said, it makes me glad that we're no longer in the European Union. It's caused all sorts of problems, but at least we don't have to look at Ursula von der Leyen and think that she is in any way our titular head. The legality of the caretaker government and its constitutionality and its role, for example, in policing the Olympics has been called into question. And of course, there's the rolling crisis of who's going to be prime minister. Is it going to be Lucie Castet, the preferred choice of the left, Xavier Bertrand, or Laurent Wauquiez? Wauquiez, that's right. Or a compromised technocrat candidate like Michel Barnier or Bernard Cazeneuve. Is France any closer to actually having a new legal operational government, Freddie? I think this will only take place towards the second part of August, and to deliver a candidate, everybody's on holiday now, so everybody's kind of taking their time. There's no real rush, I think, by the last week of August, we should have a confirmed candidate.
Of course,
as far as telling you,
I forget. Paris is in the south. Paris is on the Côte d'Azur for the whole of August, basically, isn't it? So,
yeah, we have no tourists, but we have Parisian tourists. Yes,
that's right. So
nothing clear. August. This is more like big international events, major move from, the globalists is happening in August and July, no doubt about it. But as far as the domestic policies, it's really the politics here is very quiet in August. And then just before September, they'll release what they want to release, giving some new directions. And then we're going to have this new program. I'm very interested about to hear the program of this kind of coalitions or whatever they want to call it, because I don't see what they've all disagreed for long on everything. Yes. And suddenly they got to present a program that seems to be composed and where everybody's agreed, So, you cannot take this seriously for 1 second. This is when
I hope that there may be, and believe it or not, I hope that the left and right groups might find some common ground and exclude the neoliberal globalists in the centre. They have more in common than they realise, I think. Freddie Ponton, thank you so much for joining us on today's News Talk, and we'll speak to you again very, very soon.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you, Basil.
I'm Basil Valentine. I'll be back same time tomorrow. Don't go away. State of the Nation right after the headlines. See you tomorrow.